monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients PCI and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. When
using your device to meet with a provider face-to-face from the comfort of your home. Call 585-243-9595 to schedule an appointment. Noise Health Urgent Care is open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week, even weekends and holidays. Walk-ins welcome at our Geneseo location, 50 East South Street. Digital X-ray available too. Noise Health Urgent Care. Your health care, your way.
Radio Free New York.
All right, let's deposit 25 cents more and see if we can get 3 more minutes of Andrew Hollister.
Yeah, did we make it? Can you guys hear me all right?
Sounds good now.
Beautiful. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. I tell you what, my Spectrum connection has been terribly unreliable with all this quarantine stuff going on. And I've even got the business class, so supposedly I'm supposed to have that prioritized traffic, but it doesn't always seem to be keeping up.
Wasn't very prioritized last quarter hour, let me tell you what.
Yeah.
You were all over the place. But anyway, the question I was asking you, I don't think we got a reply, at least not one that we could hear. You don't know whether the 10,000 includes the 3,700 that Bill de Blasio ordered added to the total, even though they were never tested. They were just, quote, presumed COVID positive.
No, I don't know if that number includes that or not. If it does, then that could potentially put New York City at very close to the numbers of upstate. They'd be almost equal. So yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't have the answer to that one.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's just something for folks to consider. And also, we know that there's people are becoming increasingly suspicious about whether these COVID figures the books are being cooked. Because we have all this anecdotal evidence from the field that people are being classed as COVID deaths. That they're people who they're first of all they're very elderly. They may be morbidly obese. They may have all kinds of other health compromising conditions, such as CHF, COPD. They may have diabetes. They may have uncontrolled high blood pressure, but they test positive for COVID, and so then the cause of death goes on the death certificate as COVID.
Yeah, and in those cases specifically, I could even see the medical argument for that. Like, if they didn't get COVID, would they have lived another 2 or 3 years, even with those health conditions? But the ones that people have brought up where somebody gets into a car accident and they blame it on COVID or something like that, I have an issue with. But, as somebody who is an EMT, there were certainly times we'd come across somebody who maybe had a heart condition or, something like that. And their cause of death could have been, something that normally wouldn't kill somebody because the two combined gave, aggravated their condition enough to kill them. That makes sense to me, but the car accidents, not so much.
Right. The legal concept is what's called proximate cause. In other words, what is the most, in terms of time and severity, what is the most dominant factor to cause some kind of adverse effect? Proximate cause is what the thing is, and there's an awful lot of directives aimed at the medical community saying that under this circumstance, this circumstance, this circumstance, and 25 other circumstances, you presume COVID presence in the case and you classify it as a COVID case. Well, that's illogical because we're trying to get to the bottom of this. Are we incentivizing the medical community to classify questionable cases as COVID?
Yeah, and I think that's a big question. And I suspect this is why we're doing so much testing in New York State. I don't recall if I've mentioned this before or not. But, Governor Cuomo jumping on getting as much testing done as possible and almost like a race to see who can have the most COVID cases really rubs me in a way of, sure, there's a public health safety piece to this. Absolutely, 100% we should know about it. But then I also kind of feel like they're using this as a way to ask for more money. We already knew that New York State was $6 billion in the hole. And you're starting to see it kind of come out where Cuomo says, hey, with the last package, this state got, call it $29,000 per COVID patient, whereas we got $600 per COVID patient or something along those lines when he talks about budgeting. And my thought is they're pushing the testing so hard because at the end of the day, New York State wants to go to the federal government and go to the media and go everywhere else and say, hey, look, we have the most cases. We need the most funding. When really we need the most funding because we've ran a deficit for years and we're so deep in the hole, we're just totally screwed financially and we need a bailout.
Well, I'm tired of listening to Cuomo whine about COVID issues. First of all, he's complained bitterly that he wasn't getting help from the federal government. He needed 40,000 ventilators, so we sent him a bunch of ventilators. And what did he wind up using? He's used 5,000 ventilators. And I don't think there's anything within reason that he's asked for from the federal government that they have not provided. The problem is not the cost, so much the cost of treating these COVID patients as it is, as you have suggested, of deficit spending, irresponsible budgeting, running deficit after deficit year after year after year. And also he's got a self-inflicted wound in that he has chosen to take draconian measures to shut the state down, cutting his tax revenues drastically. So the $6 billion figure you mentioned earlier in this segment really is ballooned to about $16 billion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That number is huge now. Like, New York State is in such a bad spot. And I don't know where other states are, to be honest. That's something I should look at to see how much the deficits have increased in other states. But I would suspect that our deficit has increased by a significantly higher percentage than other states because, a lot of sales tax isn't happening because revenues aren't flowing. Payroll tax isn't coming in. Income tax isn't coming in. Like all these things that the government uses to collect money during a normal day, if you will. A lot of that stuff has been minimized to the absolute minimum. So, yeah, I mean, you've got trickles of money, and New York State is pushing off the filing dates for taxes. So the money that they would have gotten is being pushed off later anyways. Now, us at my company, we filed our sales tax. We paid it even though the deadline was extended, because our thought was, we don't want this money sitting here and then have to owe the state money later. And then, when the state chases you for money, that's not a good thing. Let me tell you, it's a situation you do not want to be in. But there's a lot of companies that were in a situation where that's just not possible. So, but what I do want to talk about, and I'll kind of intro this up and cue this up for us, is the flu in general and the Spanish flu and how there are similarities. I mean, some of the things that happened during the Spanish flu of 1918 are happening here with coronavirus in terms of government shutting things down, government mandating things. And I want to compare and contrast some of the differences and some of the similarities, because I think one of the things that we talk about often, maybe not as often as we should, is that history repeats itself. And if we don't look at history and we don't see how things were handled or how things carried out in history, chances are pretty good we're going to repeat it, maybe make the same mistakes. Maybe there are things we could have learned from that we haven't, that sort of thing. So that's why I think it's important we talk about this. But first, before that, I want to just talk about what the flu is, because I found out a surprising number of people just think the flu is actually the common cold, and they didn't really know that there's a difference. So I figured I'd just share that with you guys. So the flu is also known as influenza. Is a virus that attacks the respiratory system. It's highly contagious, and it's transmitted when somebody coughs, sneezes, apparently even talking. You can actually infect somebody, and it's because there's little respiratory droplets. And when those respiratory droplets, go on somebody else, and if they get into something like your eyes or your mouth or something like that, you can then get infected.
Yeah, say it, don't spray it, man.
Yeah, exactly. Say it, don't spray it. Yeah, absolutely. But these droplets are so small that even if you weren't, necessarily spitting when you talk, you could theoretically infect somebody that's within about 2 to 3 feet of you. Now, a cough or a sneeze especially can travel much further. But even talking, which I think a lot of people assume, like, oh, if I'm just talking to somebody but I'm not touching them, we're good. Well, it does depend on how close you are, which is why you hear often that 6 feet distance, because that's kind of generally a safe distance. If somebody sneezed on you, even from 6 feet away, chances are you're going to get covered with those droplets, which is just really disgusting, to be honest. So we have a flu season that normally runs from late fall to spring. This is pretty normal. This is typical, especially if you have kids, you're pretty well aware of this. I'll be honest, I'll say this on air, and hopefully nobody jumps on me for this, but I haven't had a flu shot and I can't even remember how long. I'm not in a high risk population for flu, so as a result, when I get asked, do you want a flu shot? I typically say no, save it for the next person who's at risk. And there's a lot of controversy over flu shots anyways. Like, they're only 30 to 40% effective.
Yeah, it depends on who you talk to. This past year was not a good one. I think the numbers there were you hear numbers between 40 and 60% effective. I got to believe, probably knowing the number of people who got flu, probably closer to 40 to 50%.
Yeah. And each year it's a little different, right? So they don't have a long-term time to create a vaccine for that specific strain that year. So there's just less testing. There's less time to develop it. There's a whole bunch of factors.
Well, they have to guess, basically. Yeah. It's a moving target, and they try to predict what the strain is going to be. And sometimes they hit the bullseye, and sometimes they don't.
Yep. Usually 200,000 people get it, and there's 3,000 to 50,000 deaths in the U.S. So that's the flu. We're going to take our break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Spanish flu and overlaps with coronavirus. You're listening to Radio Free New York. We'll be back in a moment.
Send a shout out to our friends at the WACK stations in Newark, 1420 AM, 96.9 FM, and down in the Twin Tiers of Elmira in northern Pennsylvania, the Patriot, 1230 and 1450, also 106.9 in the south part of Elmira. We'll be back.
Now, more than twice the power. More powerful FM 92.1, FM 95.5 West, and 1040 AM WYSL Avon Rochester.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center. Today, we'll look at sunny skies with temperatures getting into mid to upper 40s. We will see increasing cloud coverage tonight into tomorrow. Could hear some rumbles of thunder, and rain will fall. By tomorrow, we do have a mix between rain and snow showers, and it looks like we could see those wind gusts around 35 to 40 miles per hour. This is Samantha LaRocca with WYSL.
Behold the logic of liberals. When a cop shoots a criminal, that's the cop's fault. But when a criminal shoots an innocent person, it's the gun's fault. Let that sink in.
At Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, we want you to know we're here for your transportation needs. Our factory-trained specialists in the Victor Service Department can expertly handle any repair. Our concierge service can arrange for pickup and delivery of your vehicle if you choose. We are here for repairs, maintenance, inspections, warranty work, and recalls. Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram can help no matter where you bought your car or truck. And if you need a new vehicle, Victor can sell you a car virtually on our website, victorcdjr.com, or by appointment at our store. Trade-ins, financing, leasing are all available remotely and at your convenience. We're here to fully serve Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram customers in Victor, Canandaigua, Macedon, Fairport, and throughout the Metro and Finger Lakes. Depend on Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, here for you with sales or any service issue, no matter where you bought your vehicle. Give us a call at 381-JEEP or visit victorcdjr.com. You can depend on the team at Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram for all your transportation needs now and in the future.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
We're solitary, but always in solidarity with one another to keep our people safe and secure. For more than 40 years, we've always been about safety and unity. And while our 3 locations are currently not open, we are at the ready to welcome you in again. For now, please visit showworldstores.com. Here's to health and wellness for you and the ones you love. A message from Showworld, Henrietta, Mount Read, and Waterloo.
The Livingston County Department of Health reminds you and your family, be sure you're prepared for emergencies by creating your own at-home emergency response plan. Prepare a kit including non-perishable food, water, flashlight, radio, batteries, blankets, and medications to supply you and your family for at least 2 weeks. Place these supplies in a secure place in your home. For more information on emergency preparedness, call the Livingston County Department of Health at 243-7299.
Hey, COVID hermits, be a hero. Bring home a treat tonight. Make a quick stop at exit 11 off 390. Pick up a family favorite pie from Colby's Bakery Ice Cream and Barbecue. Just east of Route 15, Colby's Bakery, Ice Cream, and Barbecue.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
All right. Welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. And what we're going to talk about a little bit, we're going to talk about the Spanish flu. Came about in 1918. And I think it's interesting to see the overlap. And a couple of the things we've talked about on the show, especially specific to coronavirus, is the extreme government action and overreach due to coronavirus. And I was trying to find some times in U.S. history that we had some similar stuff going on, and Spanish flu seemed to be the one that lined up the best. I didn't really see anything else, and Bob, I don't know if you're aware of any other time in U.S. history that government's taken this type of action.
There was a big cholera epidemic way back, like in the 1830s. It affected the digging of the Erie Canal. I know about that. And it was very, it's an instructive thing to look up and read about. Samuel Hopkins Adams did a short story about it, I don't know, probably 50, 60 years ago. But it was very, very similar to what's going on now. You had government, swooping in and issuing draconian regulations. There's a lot of pretty foolish medical experiments going on. Because, of course, they didn't understand infectious disease very well back then. But the human response was eerily similar.
Yeah. So Spanish flu. I'll give you guys just a little bit of background on it, and then we can talk about the similarities here. So Spanish flu, which I did not know this. I always just knew it as Spanish flu. Spanish flu is actually an H1N1 virus.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not aware of that. And so obviously that created a pandemic. We had the second pandemic of H1N1 in 2009, which feels very recent. I remember when all that was happening, it was called swine flu. But it was essentially a similar virus between the two. So I wasn't aware of that. Learned something new while I was doing this research for you guys. So Spanish flu, which was an H1N1 virus, it came about January of 1918 and carried through to December of 1920. So 2 years, the world battled this flu, infected about 500 million people, which was about a third of the world's population at the time. And the death toll is when you see these numbers, it's really shows you how different record keeping has been and how far we've come, because they've estimated between 17 million and 50 million people who died from Spanish flu, but possibly as high as 100 million. So there's a pretty big gap here. We're talking 17 million to 100 million. That's a huge swing. It really comes down to like places like China and other countries did not record things very well. Even in the United States, there was a lot of, what's the right word for it? Like denial of what was going on. And a lot of that was actually pressed by the government. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So record keeping just wasn't great, which leaves us with this 83 million death discrepancy where it's unknown how many people died.
I think generally speaking, the number that's accepted is somewhere around 50 million.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I was looking at like the CDC website to see what they published. So it was kind of, they said between 17 and 50 million. And some of the information that was given is because China didn't really report numbers. So they had to kind of like guesstimate based on population what China's numbers were. But all this was going on, at and around World War I. And one of the first things that happened with this is that countries were censoring the Spanish flu and pretending that it wasn't happening. The reason it was named Spanish flu wasn't even because it originated in Spain. It was named Spanish flu because Spain was sitting there neutral and they allowed the media to report on it. So they were just the only country reporting on it and acknowledging this flu existed. And that's how it got known as the Spanish flu. It spread very quickly, especially because of the war, troops being in very close quarters, hospitals being full in close quarters. There was kind of new and more readily available transportation. Obviously, nothing compared to what we have now, but for that time, it was very high. And something that I found very interesting was the high-risk population was not the same as what coronavirus has. So when we talk about, high-risk population for coronavirus, we're talking about people who are elderly and have additional underlying conditions. With Spanish flu, it was actually people in their 20s. And people in their 20s actually accounted for more than half the deaths. And the highest risk were actually pregnant women in their 20s, and they were the most likely to die. 99% of the deaths were people under the age of 65.
Wasn't that largely because of the returning troops? The expeditionary force came back from Europe from World War I, and they brought it back with them in large numbers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you look at, troops and the military and stuff, they're going to be a younger population. I can't imagine many people over the age of 65 were deploying to Europe, as a soldier. So the other thing that's pretty interesting, and this is all just kind of like background information to kind of like paint this picture for you guys. There was actually a second wave of the Spanish flu. And the first wave wasn't actually as big of a deal. It was the second wave that killed 60 to 70% of the people. That actually happened in the fall, into winter, September to January. And that was actually the deadly portion of this virus. Before then, it was like, it was still a big deal, but it became a much greater deal in the fall. And so you hear sometimes people talk about, like, what if coronavirus comes back in the fall? To be honest, I didn't know much about viruses resurfacing later. So I was one of the people kind of wondering why people are talking about that. This is why, like, viruses can come back in the fall after they've kind of like settled through the spring season. So what you found is communities got closed. Stores, they required customers to leave their orders outside. And this is, 1918 and 1919. I mean, they had curbside to go 100 years ago. Like, they just didn't have apps and smartphones to do it. Healthcare workers at times couldn't actually tend to the sick because they themselves were so sick, they couldn't help. They had people who were grave diggers. They couldn't bury the dead because they were so sick. And what ultimately ended up happening is they started digging mass graves with what they called steam shovels. And they ended up having to bury people in mass as this happened. So Spanish flu was definitely like a huge worldwide issue that impacted, everybody across the globe. But I think the important things that we're going to talk about are the actions that the government actually took at the time. Some of this to reduce the spread, some of this to just protect public image. And I think it's important for us to look at these things and be skeptical of what's happening now and see if history is indeed repeating itself or not. Because I guarantee you, people in government have already kind of looked at some of this stuff and they've made their decisions, which things they're going to do and what they're not going to do. But before we go too far on that, I do want to throw one more thing out there. Spitting on sidewalks was banned during the Spanish flu, which is just wild to me. I didn't realize that was such a big problem. All right, guys, you're listening to Radio Free New York. We'll be back in a moment.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A-plus Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Aircraft Environmental Systems proudly supports Radio Free New York. Rochester-based leaders in climate simulation chambers for America's R&D laboratories. We're experts in troubleshooting, calibrations, custom designs, and consulting for more than 40 years. Industry pioneers, we created the first ever fleet of temperature, humidity, and altitude test chambers available to rent coast to coast. Trained and trusted by environmental chamber manufacturers, we are ACES. Find us at acesinc.com.
The Rochester area franchise dealers are here to help their customers through these trying times. Service departments and collision centers are open. Vehicle sales are initially done remotely by telephone or electronic means until you're ready to visit the dealership and take delivery of your vehicle. Proper social distancing and cleaning protocols are followed at all dealerships. Please contact your preferred dealer to schedule sales or service appointments for a safe check-in, drop-off, or pickup process. Be safe and know the franchise dealers are here for you, Rochester.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A-plus Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Radio Free New York.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. We're talking about actions taken by the government during the Spanish flu. Bob, what do you think one of the first things the government should do when there's an outbreak of an illness to protect the public?
Let's see. They appoint a committee and then they vote themselves a big salary.
Oh man, that New York State would definitely do that. What the United States federal government did with Spanish flu is they did create a committee. They created a committee for public information headed by George Creel, who said truth and falsehood are arbitrary terms. He goes on to say,
"Oh, great.
It matters very little if it is true or false." So, this became America's first propaganda machine.
Exactly. I can see this coming.
Yep. And it was essentially a license to lie to the American public. So they started running all sorts of propaganda. Now, of course, they used the war as the justification for this. They said, well, we need to make it illegal for any type of information to be published that could, make the United States look bad during a time of war. So all this came about, and they started just, Spanish flu was one of the biggest things. They couldn't allow it to be talked about or shown that America has any type of weakness, or that it was even a danger to the American public. So they started going through with the media and saying, like, you can't report on this. You have to start saying things like, this is just ordinary influenza with a different name. And they started right from the get-go. Number one thing was lie to the American people. So, not a good look. And it'll be interesting to see years from now, when we look back at this, the lies that the government has told us about this, who lied, what they lied about, what they actually knew, because none of us know, right? We'll find out eventually, but we can expect that something similar has happened. Either statewide government, maybe federal government, maybe a department in the FDA, who knows? We'll find out that they had information, they knew about the information, and they withheld it from the American people, or maybe they pointed us in the wrong direction purposely for some reason. So that was thing number one. As things started to heat up, though, as things got bad, the country, especially like state by state, things started getting shut down. So I'd mentioned before, spitting on the sidewalk got banned. I didn't realize that was a big thing. That must have been a big thing back then, is spitting on the sidewalks.
In bars, they had spittoons. These brass jars that sat on the floor, and you're supposed to spit in the spittoon.
Well, there you go. So that was one of the first practices that started, getting shut down, was spitting on the sidewalks. And you see places like St. Louis, Missouri, they shut down schools, movie theaters, and public gatherings were banned. And interestingly enough, in contrast to Philadelphia, they went on with the whole, we're going to tell people that this is normal flu, and they actually held a parade called the Liberty Loan Parade, and it was attended by tens of thousands of people in Philadelphia. They thought they were done with the flu, that everything was good to go, that there was no big deal. At that parade, the disease spread so quickly that in 10 days, over 1,000 people were dead, and 200,000 people were sick. And then they closed the saloons, then they closed the theaters, and by March, they had lost 15,000 people. But at the same time, the media was still there orchestrating, working with the federal government, and shutting down stories of the doctors who said, hey, this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do this. And the media just wouldn't run them. And ironically, the media, you would think, would be the people that would stand up and be like, no, we're going to report good journalism, we're going to report the truth. No, they like jumped at the opportunity to work with the federal government to lie to the American people. They didn't just like not fight it, they actively worked with it to make it worse.
After 100 years, things haven't changed.
Yeah, no, they haven't. We're in the same exact spot. We as Americans, we haven't really learned much from this.
Proving that technology changes, but people don't.
People don't. Yeah, no, absolutely. San Francisco actually put together a mandatory face mask wearing. And if you were in public not wearing a face mask, you were fined $5, which is the equivalent to about $85 today. Which was still, back then, that was like a lot of money. Like, people didn't have $5. So that was a big deal. If you were caught in public, you were charged with caught in public without a mask, you were charged with disturbing the peace and fined $5. And then we've got, in October of 1918, Newark officials ordered all schools and businesses to shut down. And department stores, they were deserted. A bunch of organizations, they were all canceled. All social gatherings were postponed, and that is, how all of that went. So the question kind of is, are we going to go through something similar with coronavirus? And I'm thinking the answer is no. And that's mostly based on some medical research from doctors who have analyzed this a lot, and I could be totally wrong. I'm not a medical professional in this sense of the terms, but I watched a couple doctors do an analysis of Spanish flu and coronavirus, and they pointed out some really important things that's worth us knowing about. First is, health treatments in 1918 were vastly different than they are today. A lot of the treatments involved whiskey, bloodletting, that sort of stuff that we now know is like, I mean, the whiskey's probably still good, but the rest of it, not so much. Things like disinfectants, we just have much more widely available now. They didn't really promote hand washing during the Spanish flu. They were much more focused on the spitting on the sidewalk than they were, hand washing. But they did promote social distancing. And there was other things that maybe aren't so common. Like they had communal cups where people would share cups and other things. You don't see that as much here nowadays. The other thing that was pretty interesting is they believed at the time that if you were outside, you couldn't get it. You could only get it if you were inside, which is kind of interesting because it really conflicts with the mask laws that were passed. So I thought that was interesting that they made people wear masks in public. However, they also believed and promoted that if you're outside, you can't actually get it, which of course was not true. They probably didn't know that at the time, though.
That's weird. That's the exact opposite of the cholera epidemic in the 1830s. Night air was considered to be very dangerous. So sleeping with the windows open during the cholera epidemic was considered a wanton solicitation of death.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, this was the opposite. I was reading like old newspaper articles that were like, you have to leave all the windows open in your home so you don't get the Spanish flu. So, yeah, that's actually really interesting how different they are. But the similarities I see is government really took the same type of control. They took over freedom of speech. They shut down the press, and we'll only find out if this sort of thing happened years and years from now, if the government has had any censorship on the press or not, or on the hospitals or not. But definitely shutting down the economy, pressing for mask laws, which the CDC is now pushing for, the federal government's pushing for, state government has mandated, but there's no like fines or recourse right now unless it's changed in the last maybe 48 hours.
There's an analogous role. There's an analogous role of media going on now. Like for example, you got Donald Trump is perceived as being this proponent of hydroxychloroquine, and so now the media, of course, is all ganging up on Trump and also on hydroxychloroquine as some kind of quack treatment for COVID-19, which it is not.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how things are unfolding, right? And I think it's only going to get more and more interesting as time goes further and further along. Who knows how long this is going to last? And when I say this, I don't necessarily mean the virus. I mean the government response to the virus. How long before these test kits are widely available and the government says, just to be safe, you still can't go outside, or maybe it gets worse in that you can only go outside 4 or 5 days a week. I don't know. All right, guys, you're listening to Radio Free New York. Thank you for joining me. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow.